Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Thank you for joining in on our national webinar event on the Weatherization Assistance Program Administrative Professionals Training. I'm Catherine Maddox. I'm your project director at the National Community Action Partnership for Energy Partnerships. And we are pleased to be joined today by Juliana Williams, Energy Markets and Policy Specialist at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and Kristen Ferguson, Director of Training and Development at the Interstate Renewable Energy Council. So just a few quick technical notes before we get started. This webinar will be recorded and made available to you through both a follow-up email and on the partnership's website within the next couple of days. Please note that you'll be muted for this presentation, but you should be able to hear us out of your computer speakers. If you lose audio at any time during the presentation, please click the Communicate tab in the upper left-hand corner of your screen and select the Audio Broadcast button to reboot your audio. And if you continue to have audio issues, you can also call into the session using the teleconference number located at the bottom of your confirmation email. Please send any questions that you may have in the Q&A box, and we'll be addressing those later on in the presentation. So just to share a little bit about the National Community Action Partnership and our work and the resources we have available to you before we jump into the content here today. As you, I'm sure know, we're the national hub for the 1,000 community action agencies across the country and for the 700 weatherization subgrantees, including those of you who are community action and those of you who may not be. Here, our Weatherization Leverage Partnerships Project, to share about that, we are funded by the Department of Energy to offer training and assistance to the WAP network on designing private partnerships and programs to leverage your weatherization dollars. And an overview of a lot of the training and technical assistance that we offer. It ranges from management and operations content around, say, strategic planning, board governance, customer satisfaction, to other areas of content related to innovative practices with your work. Two-generation approaches or whole family approaches is the key area. Trauma-informed care, racial equity, and of course, weatherization leveraging. So please keep an eye out for resources in any of those areas that you might be interested in. And Wednesdays are typically when you'll be able to see webinars on any of the above content, usually around 2 p.m. Eastern. We also have webinars on other days. So feel free to check out our website, communityactionpartnership.com, and on the Events tab to be able to see the upcoming webinars we have available. We also host 2 national conferences. This year we are still planning on our Seattle conference the end of August. So we'll keep you posted related to that as we learn more with the COVID situation and whether we'll be continuing to have that conference on schedule. So let's jump right into our presentation. I want to make sure to share about our presenters here today. Juliana Williams is an energy markets and policy specialist at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Her work focuses on improving policy design and program implementation for energy efficiency, distributed energy resources, and low to moderate income programs. Prior to joining NREL, Juliana managed an energy revolving loan fund for the Washington State Housing Finance Commission and oversaw utility efficiency programs at the Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission. She holds a Master of Public Policy from the University of Maryland and plays competitive ultimate frisbee. And it's exciting also, she and I graduated from University of Maryland together, so it's great to connect here again as colleagues. Kristen Ferguson is the Director of Training and Development for IREC, a nonprofit that works toward a 100% clean energy future that is reliable, resilient, and equitable. She led the development of the WAP Administrative Training and believes that well-designed learning experiences can help us all to perform better on the job. She lives outside of Boston. Okay, with that, I'll pass this over to Juliana.
Okay, let me, all right. Okay, is the screen showing my nice windmill and waves landing?
Yes.
Great. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us today. we wanted to give you a little bit of a background of where these trainings came from, how they were developed, how we decided what topics to cover, and then we'll give you a demonstration of the training site so you can understand how to navigate the site, find the courses that you want, and get familiar with those features. So based on feedback from the network, most recently in 2017 and 2018, but kind of building up before that, DOE had gotten feedback that it would be useful to provide trainings for non-field staff. So there was a lot of work and resources in supporting field workers through the standard work specifications, through the weatherization training centers, but that there was a gap in support for the folks who do program administration. And so based on that, back in, it was probably fall of 2018, the Department of Energy charged NREL with developing a series of online trainings that could support subgrantee program administration. And so it took us about a year and a half, a little bit of less than a year and a half to get the trainings all pulled together and ready. But the result is that we do have 29 online training modules that are self-paced, that can be taken multiple times. And the idea here is that we want to complement existing training resources and provide kind of a consistent body of practice that can be applicable across the country. So you'll note that the topics that we actually cover later in this they're topics that are broadly applicable. There may be state or locational specific requirements that these trainings don't address because we wanted to make sure that they would apply across the country. So then I'm going to hand it to Kristen to talk a little bit about the training development process.
Thanks, Juliana. Hi, everyone. As Catherine mentioned, I'm with IREC, and we were really excited to work on this project because we are really looking forward to a 100% clean energy future, and none of that can happen without the work that is going on in the WAP right now. So this was just a fantastic project to be a part of because of all the stories that we heard from your peers, essentially. So let me back up a minute. What I wanted to tell you a little bit about is kind of how we develop this training, and hopefully you'll get a big sense of this when you jump in and try it yourself. But what we did at the beginning of this project kind of right away was get together and hear from your peers, people who are actually doing these jobs, who know a lot about all these moving pieces and how they fit together and how to do all of it with the limited resources that they have. And our goal was really kind of to distill down what aspects of this non-field work can most impact the effectiveness of weatherization at the subgrantee level. And we talked to kind of everybody from, subgrantees and folks working to grantees and project officers to kind of see how the pieces fit together. And from there, we really had to try to prioritize topics that subgrantees are going to encounter most frequently or that have the largest impact. Because, if you start out trying to develop training that doesn't exist, you can develop it about anything. But we really wanted to target those things that are going to help you to do your job more effectively. And we took those topics and they were validated by peers, and perhaps even you responded to a questionnaire that went out to say, hey, are we hitting the mark with these topics? Is this what you're looking for? Is this going to help you to either train your employees or to maybe get some training that you hadn't had before that's going to really make a difference on the job? And so we started looking at essentially, and Juliana, if you go to the next slide, it'll talk a little bit about kind of the roles that we were aiming at. And the training itself was kind of trying to gear towards management tasks, fiscal tasks, and quality assurance tasks. And the names might vary based on your organization and the names of the roles, but we really were looking at it as a topic or task, so that if you are somebody who wears a lot of hats and does, program management, fiscal tasks, and QA, you find a lot that are applicable to you. And if it's somebody who wants to kind of hone in on quality assurance, there's something for them. But we really stuck to kind of what's happening on the job. And so we gathered that group of, more than a dozen subject matter experts, and we really worked with them throughout the year because although there are regional differences, and there were people from, all over, all the way to Alaska who participated on this working group with us. And your organization and organizations might do things differently. This group of subject matter experts really focused on the commonalities, and so that we could really kind of find something that applied to as many organizations as possible. And then once those topics were identified and narrowed down, believe it or not, 29 is narrowed down, your peers, these subject matter experts, really worked with us to craft scenarios, really realistic scenarios that are real situations that you or your employees could find themselves in, because that's what we as learners need to learn, is we need to be able to put ourselves in that position and think as we would on the job. And then on top of that, we add these realistic choices that you have to make in the training, and then the consequences and what happens. Generating this level of realistic detail is a challenge, and so this group of subject matter experts, your peers, the people that are also out in the field while they're kind of doing this on the side, they just did a fantastic job of saying, well, this is something that I learned the hard way, and I want to make sure we share it with people. This is something that could really happen to a program manager, and let's give them some information so that when it happens, they can make a good decision about it. So while there's not always one right answer that applies to everyone, the process that you go through to make that decision on the job, we hope that becomes evident through the training. What do you need to consider? What are those factors? Where can you go for help? How can you practice making these choices and these decisions in the training before you do them on the job? And, for example, and that's the big thing, is we wanted people to practice. And you'll see that, we'll show you a little example of that, and hopefully you get to check this out on your own soon. So if on the job, what you have to do is create a production schedule, we want you to be able to practice that in the training, but you might encounter an unexpected roadblock. What do you do? What do you need to think about? If you are reconciling invoices and you're entering invoices after invoices and you find a discrepancy, we wanted you to practice that discrete task and then, figure out what steps to take to resolve that situation, just like you would, at your desk on the job. What about if you run into a quality issue with a subcontractor? How do you handle that? And what are the possible ways that that subcontractor might react, or, what kinds of things that you might and definitely will, if you haven't already, encounter on the job? So the subject matter experts really helped us to flesh that out, really breathe life into this training, tell your learning through stories in a way that hopefully you take that back on the job. So with each learning experience, we hope that your knowledge and confidence on the job grow, and we hope that you find ways to improve your organization and share what you learn on the job with your peers. That's really important to us, that this critical information transfer to the job. So we will show you a little bit about that. We'd really love to hear your questions, so we'll give you a chance to open that up to you. So let me pass it back to Juliana, who will tell you a little bit about what it looks like in the learning management system, and then we'll show you a little bit of examples of the learning activities.
Great, thanks, Kristen. So each of the training modules, we wanted them to be pretty easily digestible. So each of them are about 10 to 15 minutes. There might be one or two that might take about 20 minutes, but we wanted these to be easily integrated into the course of the workday. And these are trainings that can be taken as many times as you want. And we want you to see these as resources for your job going forward. So each of them has interactive scenarios where you can check your understanding, practice scenarios that you would see on the job, as Kristen mentioned. We organized the trainings into a series of learning pathways to help users figure out, what trainings are best for me or are most relevant to my job. And so after this, I'll give an overview of what those learning pathways are. Along with each of the modules, the training modules themselves, we also have uploaded additional references into the training platform so that you can download those and have them as references on your job going forward. So some of these include links to useful statutes or grant guidance, Some of them are sample templates. Some are job aids that basically summarize the content of the training and can be kind of a quick reference of like, what are the different steps I need to cover in this particular process. So we want these trainings to not just be something that you sit in front of your computer, you take once, and then leave. We want them to be a resource for you going forward. And then at the end of each training module, once you have completed the training and then the course evaluation, you will be able to download a completion certificate. So if you are required to take any of the trainings by your own management or by a grantee, or we've talked to a couple of weatherization training centers who are interested in maybe having folks take one or two of these modules before coming to an in-person training, you'll be able to demonstrate that you've completed the trainings. So I wanted to just give a summary of the different learning pathways that and the topics that you'll encounter on the training platform. So the first one is a budget and planning learning pathway. And we've actually separated out the first two, Welcome to the WAP and Federal Statutes, Regulations, and Grant Guidance, as kind of an introduction learning pathway, because those will give a good overview of the structure of the program and the framework that the program is operated within. These are really useful for new staff, but also for folks who maybe are transitioning into a new role and haven't thought about the program requirements from that particular perspective before. And then we also get into weatherization, budget, and planning. These top 5 modules have actually been the most popular so far. It seems like folks are really interested in just getting additional support on how to do production planning and managing the different funding streams and pulling it all together to stay in compliance. So these top 5 have been by far the most popular, though I think that may also be in part because they're the first 5 folks encounter in the system. And then we also go through if a WAP budget or contract needs to be modified with the grantee, and keeping track of budgeting along the way. The next learning pathway is on procurement. So this applies for folks deciding whether or not to outsource procurement of services or vendors or materials. So really, while some subgrantees have used subcontractor crews to do the work, pretty much everyone will need to do procurement for materials and vendors. So this walks through the entire process of deciding whether or not to use internal resources or do procurement, and then how to set up and implement a procurement process that gets you the best value for your money and also stays in compliance with all of the federal procurement requirements. The next learning pathway is around client relations. This is really useful for intake staff or anyone who is externally focused in within your agency. Here there's a lot of scenarios to practice, tone and approach for dealing with unique or difficult situations to make sure that you're meeting both your client's needs and staying in compliance with your own requirements. We have a very short learning pathway on the economics of weatherization, but this one goes through the way a house works together as a system and the way that different measures work together to influence the energy consumption in the house. This is really useful for folks who are not in the field to get an understanding of what the field crews are seeing, what the auditors are recommending, so that you have a little bit more of a technical understanding of the measures that are being requested for a given home. And then the Understanding Savings to Investment Ratio module looks at how those measures are calculated to be cost effective and how incidental repair measures and health and safety affect the savings to investment ratio for our project. We have a learning pathway on fiscal tasks, so making sure that all the documentation for a project and for a home is in place, making sure that the money is going to appropriate places, and that all of the files are ready and able to document what you're doing for the grantee for monitoring. We have a management pathway, which is intended for folks who are managing a staff, looking at supporting employees in the unique environment within the weatherization program. So this looks at training resources and coaching, but also looking at how to support staff when they might be dealing with difficult situations with clients, or just the overall workload and impact of the program. We have a learning pathway on quality improvement. So this is looking at both internal within a program and also working with subcontractors to identify any work quality issues and figure out a plan for how to bring the work quality back up to the standard that you want to see. Then lastly, we have a one-module learning pathway on multifamily weatherization. Many of the steps of the process for weatherizing multifamily are the same, but there are unique situations or different measures and approaches for working with multifamily projects successfully that we have highlighted in this training module. So that is a basic summary of the content that we have in the training modules. And so I want to give a little bit of a video demonstration of what some of the activities look like in the trainings. And Kristen will give some context of why certain exercises were chosen or what they might look like from a user perspective.
Yes, this is a 2-minute video, so it's going to go by pretty quickly, and you're able to watch it again and again as you like. So we just wanted to kind of put together a little bit so you could get a sense of what the training looked like, because many people aren't really familiar with what I call kind of good immersive online training. So we are introducing characters who can also be your peers that give you expert tips, just like, if you pick up the phone and call somebody else. So, and these again come from our great pool of subject matter experts who are helping. We want you to be able to engage in the learning, so you don't just sit there passively listening. You're asked to kind of move dials and turn things, as well as answer questions. And then you get feedback about, what's relevant. Again, we have this is non-technical, but we have some other ways that you can learn so that you can better relate to customers, even in a non-technical environment. And so you're going to have to actually read and drag and drop. You're going to have to put yourself in situations where, what would I say to this client? And then make the best decision so you can kind of, decide, would I do that the same way? You have opportunities to do calculations just like you would on the job. You can ask a peer, kind of like, call a friend so that they can give you some advice. And again, we really wanted to have people engage in learning. And if you had to do a calculation on the job, if you had to enter in, invoices, if you have to pick up the phone and talk to a client or respond to their question, if you had to calculate, whether they're going to qualify, we wanted everybody to be able to practice that. So that's kind of our 2-minute video that just says, look what you're in store for when you kind of start, and really just say, where do you want to start? So we're always looking for those immersive learning experiences where you're not a passive participant. You are actually engaged in the learning. You are making those decisions. You are making selections. You are listening to clients and hearing what they say, and then choosing responses to them. You are completing a production schedule. You're filling in the spreadsheet. You're making changes for the month and things like that. You are making choices about your employees' training and how you're going to recommend to spend that PNTA budget. So that's just a little bit there. You will, I imagine, have this link, so please check it out as well. We're going to tell you a little bit about what we've heard so far. I can tell you that a couple folks so far who have been in our system. We've got a Tina from Utah, who some of you might know. She was able to share some extra feedback with us, and I don't think she's able to be on the line today, but she said, you know, as somebody that's been in the program for a couple years, she had used Auditor's Field Guide and Policies and Procedures manuals, and she kind of essentially trained herself because there wasn't anything in one place. So she really liked that you know, she could kind of grab what she needed from one place, and she really liked how interactive each module was, and that the resources that accompany them were very helpful too. Then we heard from Sarah in New Hampshire, and she also said she really likes the interactive design of the module, and she sees a lot of different applications for the training, you know, from onboarding new hires to actually, you know, ongoing professional development for incumbent staff. So one of the things I think that we hit the mark on so far, as Sarah comments on, is that the length and the level of the modules are just right to fit training into work days. We wanted people to be able to do this with them, you know, lunch at their desk if they wanted to. And hopefully, you know, and as she says, use some of these topics as springboards to dive deeper into certain aspects of program administration. So that's just some of kind of the more specific stuff. And then Juliana has kind of gathered from the learning management system other feedback that we're getting just from kind of the initial wave of learners.
Yeah, and I will say one of the things that we've found is that as more folks are going to working remotely to deal with the coronavirus, we've seen a pretty substantial spike in the number of users and the number of courses each user is taking in the system. So just between Monday and Wednesday this week, we gained an additional 200 users, and the number of courses taken doubled from about 750 to over 1,500 courses completed by all of our users. And so I think one of the things that we can really rely on is that these are online as folks are not getting into the field or are working from home. This is a really great opportunity at this time to take these trainings and you know, refresh some topic areas that you may have already been working on, but might find some best practices or new ideas from these trainings, or expand the number of topics that you're involved in and you're understanding through these training modules. So far we've gotten really positive responses from folks who have been using the program. And we're really excited that these are available now, given that times are a little bit different than normal. So we're going to stop talking about the trainings and actually move into a demonstration of the training program. And so I will switch which screen I'm sharing. Actually, yeah. We'll come back to this slide after the demonstration, but this just gives the URL for the learning management system. And when you first register, there will be a code WAP training that you will need to enter, and then there will be instructions sent to your email for how to complete registration and gain access to the system. So once you are able to log in, you'll see this is kind of your dashboard landing page. And it's the home page. It has a lot of quick links to different parts of the program, but I do want to note here, it shows a few of the learning pathways and the modules on this main page, but those are the ones that I have started or assigned to myself. It doesn't show the complete list of training modules, so for that you'll go to the content library, and I will get to that in just a moment. But I also wanted to highlight a couple of other features on this landing page. We have this quick start guide, which is goes over the different features on the site, key items for how to navigate or what clicking on each of the different options accomplishes. So this quick start guide will always be here on your home landing page. So if you ever have any difficulty with navigation, we suggest that you go to that first. And if you still have difficulty with the system, you can always email the weatherization.support@nrel.gov email, which I will go back to on the PowerPoint slides. The landing page also shows your recent achievements, and so you'll be able to see which courses you have completed. And then you can also sort through which courses you have in progress. We're not really assigning any timelines, so overdue won't really be relevant, but courses that you want to take but you haven't started yet, and courses that you've completed. So you'll be able to filter through and see what these ones look like. And my internet's a little bit slow because I think a lot of people are working from home and are using up the bandwidth. But now I'm going to take you to the content library. So this, again, has the quick start guide up at the top. And then you are able to see all of the learning pathways. The learning pathways will show up first, and then you'll see the learning modules themselves. And the modules are organized effectively in the same order as these learning pathways. You have the opportunity to add these to your favorites, which will allow you to easily sort for certain modules when you come to the content library. And then you'll also be able to search for any modules, search for keywords in the title up at the top right. So I'm going to open up one of these learning pathways so that you can see what that looks like. So for planning and budget, it'll list each of the individual courses in the order that we have presented them. And to take a course, you'll click on this little play arrow, and it'll launch the learning module. And then in order to complete every module, you'll also have to respond to a short course evaluation. And this is really important because it gives us feedback on how appropriate the content was, if there were any questions or concerns, how useful or relevant you found the scenarios, and feedback for developing additional training modules in the future. So once you have completed the course evaluation and the module, then it'll show as 100% complete here. And once you complete the course evaluation, once it becomes locked. So hopefully you'll be able to give us your feedback the first time around. But the individual modules do not become locked because you can take them as many times as you want. Also within the learning pathway, there's this tab for additional references, which lists, organized by module, the downloadable resources that we have available and associated with each module. So then if we go back to the content library and just open up an individual module, the structure will look largely the same. You'll have this play button here for the individual module itself, and then an option to select the course evaluation. You'll have this tab for additional references, the same list as you can access from the learning module, and then it'll have achievements once you have completed the module. And I just wanted to briefly show you what opening a module looks like. So once you get into the system and have picked which trainings you want to take, and you click on the module, it'll load in the same window, and it'll begin automatically playing once it loads up. And I want to note that every module has these same features up at the top right. So feedback, this here is intended for if you have any technical issues with the training module, it will automatically send an email to us so we can resolve the technical issues. We actually did have one that we one of our users identified, and we were able to resolve that issue pretty quickly. So if you experience any technical difficulties, this feedback button is where you want to go. Once you have completed a module, or at any time during a module, you can click Next. This, I believe, will take you to the course evaluation, since that is listed after the training. And then from there, I believe it will go to the next training. You can always exit here, or you can use the back button to go back to the main screen. And then this little menu on the side just shows you that you have the training itself and the course evaluation. So if we exit back, we come back to the module landing page here. If you have to stop at any point within the middle of a training and you have to exit, you can always pick back up and continue this course from exactly the same spot that you left off. You're also able to restart from the beginning if that would be your preferred option. So then going back to the content library, again, we have it organized by learning pathway, but you can just take any module in the order that you want. It's quite a few, though we do have a number of users who have actually taken all 29 modules by now. I think they're taking the time to work from home and just cranking those out. That said, I do encourage you to revisit these from time to time because taking all 29 in a short period of time might make it difficult to absorb everything. So you'll be able to come back to these at any point. And then the last major feature of the site is this achievement list. So you'll be able to download your achievement certificate to show anyone who you need to that you have actually completed it. It'll be automatically generated. And it should have the date of completion. This one might be a little bit different because I have administrative access, but you'll be able to download the certificate and use that to show that you've completed the trainings. So with that, that is the overall demonstration of the site. I'm going to go back to our slide with the link to the URL and the support email. And from here, I believe we can open this up for questions from you all. So
great.
We have
can you hear me, Juliana?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. Yep, we've got a question here about how can I integrate the modules into my agency's training plan?
Yeah, so, although these are all short training modules, and it should take about 10 to 15 minutes, we're finding that, between looking at the additional resources and deciding what to take and getting into it, it might take a little bit of time. And we do have almost 30 training modules. So, this is a couple of days worth of training if you were to take it in, in one setting or a couple of settings. So folks would want to plan for the staff time to integrate into, your workload. But also, it's important to work with your staff to identify a specific training plan. The introduction module, learning pathway with the Welcome to WAP and the statutes and guidance is useful for any new hire, but then we actually have a module about determining the right training for your staff. So I would encourage folks to take that training and think through, what are the training needs? How can you accommodate that with time and workload? And then also, I would say ask your staff which topics they'd be interested in. But we definitely do have a training module on how to plan the right training. So I would encourage folks to look at that one.
Great, we've got another one. My program is reviewing our policy manual for currency and compliance. Can the training modules help with that?
Yes. Let's see. I'm not recalling off the top of my head which of our training modules address those topics, but within the budget and planning modules, we address updates to program and compliance. And I want to see, Kristen, is there anything that you wanted to weigh in on related to this topic?
I think what we tried to do for most of the modules is really kind of talk about what your policies and procedures should be if you aren't already doing them. So I think you could look for a little bit of that in each one. So that's an important aspect of digesting the modules.
Yeah, and I will also add that there are a few modules that have templates for, maybe it's for production planning spreadsheets or for, checklists for the order in which to make certain changes or follow a process for making updates. So I would encourage folks to look at the additional resources to make sure that you're getting the full benefit of these trainings.
And Juliana, we have a note here about if you could just touch on how the training centers and private training organizations might be able to help customize these to meet any state or local requirements, if there's anything further you can share on that.
Sure. So we just launched these trainings last month in February, and already people are thinking about what's next, which is great. At the moment, we're working with training centers to figure out how we can integrate with them. These trainings are free and accessible to everyone, and so if subgrantees or grantees or training centers identify topic areas where these don't cover or don't go into as much depth or local specification as is desired, one of the options is to use these as kind of a consistent baseline of understanding. And one of the ideas that some of the training centers have been throwing around is potentially having folks take these trainings prior to coming to an in-person training or prior to working with a training provider to do more customized local specific trainings.
Great. And another question here. Within the program, can you have an administrator account that can be managed within the agency to assign certain staff members to a particular learning track?
Yeah, so that is something that we have the capability of doing. If folks are interested in having that set up, what we can do is I would suggest that you email this weatherization.support@nrel.gov email, and we can set up a program director or whoever it is who's going to be in charge of making those assignments. We can set you up to have kind of team leader access, and so then you'd be able to assign specific training modules to your staff and be able to track, that they're completed and when, and see that process. So at the moment, we'd prefer it if folks could email us. There's a little bit of privacy concerns, but we do have that capability. And if you're interested in accessing that, just send an email to the Weatherization support account here.
Great. And then just to note on, could you let us know, is there a recommended internet browser?
Gosh, I know that it works well in Chrome and Firefox. It also works in Internet Explorer. I am not as familiar with Edge, but it should be accessible in most major browsers. We at NREL largely use Chrome, and so we know that all the development there works. But this is the platform for the learning management system is provided by SAP, which is a major software vendor, and so they've worked out the kinks with all the major internet browsers. So if you do experience any difficulty with a particular browser, I would suggest first try an alternate browser, or feel free to shoot us an email for some technical support.
And then another question, are you considering a general WAP client education module? This person's noting that they understand the client interaction portion and assistance, but curious about more on client education.
Gotcha. Yeah, so thank you for that question. So we do have client engagement as one of our module topics, but we haven't specifically pulled out client education as its own module, though there are some components of that integrated into the client engagement modules. Kristen, did you want to address anything else on this topic?
Yes, that's a good question. So for example, in the module about deferrals, we try to incorporate a little bit of it there. And I think we also try to provide some examples as well. But we'd love to hear more specifically, you know, when are you thinking about educating clients, and especially after you've kind of seen some of the modules, to know, you know, what future modules would be desirable.
Yeah, as Kristen mentioned, the 29 modules that we developed were not you know, the comprehensive list of all topics that were brainstormed. We did have to pare it down a bit, but there is the possibility of developing additional trainings in the future if there's sufficient demand. So if there's a topic such as client education that you feel is not sufficiently covered that would be useful to have training on, please certainly send that feedback our way. It could be either through the course evaluations after each module or to this weatherization support email.
And another question, just thinking about with this opportunity where, again, many folks are working from home, have you heard about any teams, you know, reviewing modules jointly in some fashion and then having a team discussion?
You know, I have not, but I think that does sound like a good option. The way that the learning management system is set up, I think it would probably make the most sense for folks to take the course on their own and then have you know, team discussion afterwards. If you wanted to kind of walk through some of the exercises together, that would be a good option. But I would recommend that folks take the individual trainings on their own before trying to come together as a group.
Great. Well, that looks like all of our questions.
And then we've got entirely. It looks like we have one more. So we did have a question about cost, and these are entirely free. DOE committed to making these available to the network. And so all of the trainings are free and accessible to anyone who wants to take them. And in fact, there may be a couple of modules that might be useful for subcontractors to take as well. So if you want subcontractors to take any of the training to make sure that they're up to speed on expectations and requirements of the program, certainly feel free to share this around. So the last question that I see about the trainings, if you go to this website, wap.litmus.com, and I will show you what that looks like for the actual registration in just a moment. So if you go, gosh, okay, trying to move this thing. I'm having a little bit of difficulty. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to sign out, and this will be the landing page when you go to wap.litmus.com. And so down here, if it's your first time logging in, you'll click this link here. It's the self-sign-up link, and use the code WAP training. And this will always be listed up here. But we wanted to have this extra step in part so that we don't get bot logins and that we can kind of verify that folks are actual people within the network. But if you go to this link and enter in WAP training, here's where the code will go, and you'll just add in WAP training and then your name and email and register. And that'll send an email to the account that you just added in here with a link to complete your registration.
Great. We do have another question that came through. Has there been anything developed concerning wage determination tools for weatherization?
Not in this wave of modules. Kristen, is there anything you want to add to that?
That actually I don't think was brought up before when we were kind of brainstorming all the things, not that I recall anyway. So I think you should put it on the list and then kind of shop around and see what else kind of floats to the top of the list.
Great. So it looks like we have a couple of additional suggestions of topics for trainings, or at least resource developments in the Q&A. So I appreciate that. And then Catherine, it looks like we have a question about when will a copy of the webinar and the slides be made available?
Yes, great. So we will be, we're recording it now, and so we will be sending this out to those who registered within the next day or so. And then we'll also have it on our website at communityactionpartnership.com/energy partnerships website. So we'll have that available.
Great. So I think that largely covers the questions that we got. So I'm going to advance to and hand it back to Catherine.
Great. And I do want to note one last comment that we received. It says, "Thank you. I'm in the process of developing a program manager training for our network, and these modules are very helpful." So thanks for the encouraging words. Yes. So thanks again. We really appreciate Juliana and Kristen being able to join in today and sharing this important content with us. And a lot of hard work went into this, and really appreciate this being available. So just to wrap up here, just to make sure you're aware again of the Community Action Partnership and what we can do for you. Again, we are focused on the leveraged resources for your weatherization program. So we can help facilitate connections to experienced peers related to that. If you need assistance with data collection or messaging, as you reach out to utility partners, or if you want to go before public utility commissions and advocate on behalf of your customers, we have resources and tools on that. For an example would be also a funding report that we do with NASCAS about non-leveraged federal funds. The 2018 report should be coming out shortly, and you're able to use that data, when you go to speak with elected officials, and be able to share how you are able to leverage those dollars and talk about that across your state or across the nation. Other examples would be tips on building effective relationships with utility regulators, and also on, say, the importance of WAP and leveraging your WAP, why you should be looking into that, and how you could start leveraging your WAP if you're not already. So thanks again. We do have another webinar coming up here shortly related to the 2020 census and how we can be getting the word out about the 2020 census through weatherization. I think we'll need to think a little more creatively on that given our current circumstances. But we are looking to share some of that content April 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we did just recently have webinars related to healthy homes. We have those available on our website. And also, if you're not familiar with CAP Solar and the financing they have available for solar projects that you might be interested in, we can also share information with you related to CAP Solar based out of New Jersey. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And with that, we'll wrap up our webinar. Take care.
Thank you.